Have you ever changed your mind about something important and later realized you never actually decided to change it? That somehow the shift just happened without your permission or awareness. And now you're left wondering whether the thoughts you believe are yours were ever really chosen by you at all. This unsettling feeling, this quiet sense that something moved inside you without your consent, is more common than most people admit. And it points to a reality that operates beneath the surface of our daily lives. One where influence flows through invisible channels and decisions feel personal even when they've been carefully shaped by forces we never noticed. Manipulation doesn't always announce itself with obvious tactics or aggressive persuasion. It often works best when it remains completely hidden. When the person being influenced genuinely believes they arrived at their conclusions independently, through logic and personal reflection, when in reality the path was constructed long before they started walking it. Understanding how this happens requires looking at the architecture of human psychology, the predictable ways our minds take shortcuts, seek comfort, and protect our sense of identity. Because these natural tendencies, which evolved to help us survive and navigate complex social environments, have become the primary tools through which modern influence operates. Every day, billions of people scroll through information, form opinions, make purchases, and adjust their beliefs while remaining largely unaware of the psychological mechanisms being activated in real time. And this isn't a story about conspiracy or evil intent. It's simply how influence works when it understands the human mind better than most humans understand themselves. The foundation of subtle manipulation lies in something psychologists call cognitive biases. Mental shortcuts that help us process information quickly but often lead us toward predictable errors in judgment. Confirmation bias makes us naturally seek out information that supports what we already believe while dismissing or ignoring contradicting evidence. Which means once a viewpoint takes root in our minds, we unconsciously build walls around it, filtering reality to protect that initial conclusion. Availability bias causes us to judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind rather than actual statistical probability. So if we repeatedly see certain stories or images, even if they're rare occurrences, our brains begin to perceive them as common threats or trends. The anchoring effect means the first piece of information we receive about a topic becomes a reference point that shapes all subsequent thinking. Even when that initial anchor was arbitrary or deliberately placed, these aren't flaws that only affect unintelligent people, they're fundamental features of how human cognition operates. Built into the system because processing every piece of information with perfect logic would require impossible amounts of mental energy and time. What makes these biases powerful tools for manipulation is that they operate automatically, beneath conscious awareness. So when someone wants to influence your thinking, they don't need to convince you directly, they just need to activate the right bias at the right moment, and your own mind does the rest of the work. Consider how information reaches you in modern life and notice the subtle curation happening at every level before it arrives. Social media algorithms don't show you a random selection of posts. They calculate which content will keep you engaged longest and show you more of whatever triggered previous emotional responses, gradually creating a personalized information environment that feels diverse but actually reinforces specific patterns of thinking. News organizations decide which stories deserve front-page attention and which get buried, shaping your perception of what's important or threatening without ever telling you directly what to think. Product advertisements have evolved beyond simple promotion into sophisticated psychological operations, using social proof to make you feel like everyone else has already made the choice they want you to make. Using scarcity to trigger fear of missing out, using aspirational imagery to link their product with the identity you wish to have. Even the language used to describe events carries invisible influence, because calling something a crisis versus a challenge, referring to people as migrants versus refugees, or framing a policy as protecting freedom versus restricting choice activates different emotional responses and moral frameworks, guiding your reaction before you've consciously formed an opinion. None of this requires lying. The facts can remain technically accurate while the framing does the manipulation. And this is precisely why it works so effectively. Because you feel like you're responding to objective reality when you're actually responding to a carefully constructed presentation of selective information. The emotional dimension of manipulation deserves particular attention because human beings are not primarily logical creatures. We're emotional beings who use logic to justify feelings that arise first. When someone wants to influence your behavior or beliefs, triggering the right emotion is far more effective than presenting rational arguments. Fear is perhaps the most reliable emotional lever because it bypasses critical thinking and activates survival instincts, making people more willing to accept restrictions, support aggressive policies, or make impulsive decisions they'd normally question. Anger creates tribal bonding and motivation for action while simultaneously reducing capacity for nuanced thinking, which is why divisive content spreads faster than balanced analysis. Disgust operates at a visceral level that's almost impossible to override with logic. So when groups or ideas are associated with disgust responses, rational evaluation becomes extremely difficult. Hope and inspiration can also be manipulative when they're used to sell unrealistic solutions or distract from legitimate concerns, offering emotional satisfaction that prevents deeper questioning. The sophisticated manipulator understands that logic comes after emotion, so they focus on making you feel something powerful first, knowing that your intelligent mind will then construct seemingly rational justifications for the emotional response, creating the illusion that you thought your way to a conclusion when you actually felt your way there. Identity and belonging represent another profound vulnerability in human psychology because we're deeply social creatures who define ourselves through group membership and shared beliefs. When your sense of identity becomes tied to a particular viewpoint, company brand, political position, or social group, defending that viewpoint stops being about truth or accuracy and becomes about defending yourself, your worth, your place in your chosen community. This is why intelligent, educated people can hold obviously contradictory beliefs or reject clear evidence, because accepting that evidence would require abandoning part of their identity and potentially losing social connections that provide meaning and belonging. Manipulation that works through identity doesn't need to convince you of anything on the merits, it just needs to make you feel that believing a certain thing is what people like you do, that questioning it would put you outside your group, that changing your mind would mean betraying your tribe. You can see this operating across every domain of modern life, in brand loyalty that persists despite better alternatives, in political positions that people defend without understanding the underlying policies, in social movements where questioning any aspect feels like moral betrayal. The manipulated person doesn't feel manipulated, they feel authentic and principled, courageously standing by their beliefs against external pressure, never realizing that the beliefs themselves were installed through social identity mechanisms. Rather than independent evaluation, intelligence provides less protection against manipulation than most intelligent people assume, and in some ways it creates additional vulnerabilities. Smarter people are often better at constructing elaborate justifications for conclusions they reached emotionally or through bias, using their analytical abilities to defend positions rather than question them. Education can make someone more susceptible to manipulation through authority, as they've learned to trust expert consensus and institutional knowledge, which works well until those institutions are captured by interests that don't serve truth. High intelligence often correlates with confidence in one's own reasoning, which reduces the perceived need for external verification or acknowledgement of personal blind spots. The person who believes they're too smart to be manipulated is often the easiest target because they won't maintain the vigilant self-skepticism required to catch subtle influence. History provides countless examples of brilliant individuals supporting terrible ideas, not because they were stupid but because intelligence alone doesn't prevent bias, emotional reasoning, tribal loyalty, or the simple fact that everyone operates with incomplete information within social contexts that shape acceptable thinking. The professor, the doctor, the engineer, each can be just as vulnerable to manipulation as anyone else. They simply use more sophisticated language to defend their influenced positions. Awareness itself offers the primary defense against manipulation, not absolute protection, but a meaningful reduction in vulnerability. When you understand that your mind uses shortcuts and makes predictable errors, you can build habits of checking whether you're responding to information or to presentation, to facts or to emotional framing. When you recognize that your first reaction is usually emotional rather than logical, you can pause and ask what feeling is being triggered and why someone might want to trigger that particular feeling in this particular moment. When you notice yourself defending a position with unusual intensity, that's often a signal that identity rather than accuracy is driving your response, creating an opportunity to examine whether you're protecting a belief or protecting your sense of self. When everyone in your information environment seems to agree on something, that's not necessarily evidence that it's true. It might be evidence that you're in a curated environment designed to create false consensus. The goal isn't paranoid skepticism of everything, which would be exhausting and counterproductive, but rather a kind of gentle curiosity about your own mental processes. A willingness to notice when you're being pushed toward a conclusion rather than arriving at one. An ability to distinguish between your authentic reactions and responses that have been engineered. The uncomfortable truth is that perfect independence of thought probably doesn't exist. We're all influenced constantly by language, culture, social expectations, and the information environments we inhabit. And perhaps the question isn't whether you're being influenced, but whether you're aware of this influence and whether it's serving your genuine interests and values or someone else's agenda. The person who thinks they're completely free from manipulation has usually just become very good at not noticing it, while the person who maintains a kind of informed humility, who regularly questions their own certainty and examines where their beliefs came from, builds a more honest relationship with their own mind and gains a better chance of making genuinely independent choices. This isn't about becoming cynical or trusting nothing. It's about developing a more sophisticated understanding of how influence works and building the psychological tools to notice when it's happening. The future belongs to those who can think clearly in environments designed to prevent clear thinking, who can maintain independent judgment while acknowledging social influence, who can hold strong values while questioning specific beliefs, and who understand that the most dangerous manipulation is always the kind you don't notice because it feels exactly like your own authentic voice.